Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Sunday, April 10th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 6 days, the Notre Dame game in 146 days. We'll come back to that a little bit later. The game against Michigan in 230 days. We're also going to be talking about that today. An event that is going to shape a big part of your fall is happening right now, and most people probably don't even know about it. It is the annual TV draft between ESPN and Fox. It's something we've discussed on the show before. ESPN and Fox and their affiliated networks pick which weeks of the season they want to have the first pick of games televised. And, 6 months from now, when you're angrily wondering why a certain Ohio State game is kicking off at noon instead of in primetime, this right now, this is the answer. So my guest today is Tony Gerdeman. We host the Buckeye Weekly podcast together. And when I can't find anyone better for the morning scoop, he's here with me too. Tony, thanks as always for joining me.
Thank you, Tom, for that wonderful introduction. It is, as always, an honor, a privilege, and an obligation.
Not necessarily in that order. Let's start with what this draft really does and how it works. The TV rights for each conference only cover games that are designated for that conference as home games. So, Big Ten TV rights will cover Ohio State and Notre Dame playing in Columbus this fall. That's covered in this draft. When the Buckeyes go to South Bend next year, that would not be covered because that's a Notre Dame game. That's going to be on NBC. So with that, that's a little bit of background. We're going to end up doing a lot more explanation because this is a little bit complicated. But once that draft starts, what happens?
Once the draft starts, it's just a bunch of back and forth. Well, for one, you've got a war room, say Fox's war room. They've got the number one pick. They always select Ohio State, Michigan that week of games. And I think, I don't know if we can emphasize this enough. They draft weeks, not games. Like right now they are drafting weeks. So that's what they're looking at. And they always draft the Ohio State, Michigan game week first because they spent more money for their rights than ESPN. And part of that is so that they always get Ohio State, Michigan with their number one pick. And so then it's, once that is kind of, out of the way in terms of, there's respective war rooms talking about which game they want or which week they want. And you look at the games, there's a lot of just talking amongst the people at ESPN. Okay, what is Fox going to do? Which week, knowing that week is off the table, the Ohio State, Michigan week is off the table, what would we want? And then then you got to weigh what game is going to get the best ratings, because that's what this is all about. You're looking for, like if you're thinking about this like an actual draft of an athlete, like upside and, bang for your buck and immediate contributions. And so these war rooms talk about which week they think is the best in terms of, one, which game, if we have number one pick of games that week, which game do we want? And so you build your draft board on the games that you want based on the weeks that they are in. But it's a back and forth thing that, like you and I were talking before, it's like you think this just kind of happens in an afternoon or something, or maybe a weekend, but this process can take weeks. There is no clock, nobody's on the clock per se, except I guess the calendar coming down is you eventually got to get this stuff done. And so it's a lot of meetings with executives, television executives, advertisers probably, and all of that good stuff that nobody needs to see that sausage being made. But I would love to see a process of like how the drafting is done and how it goes. But it's just not something that is feasible as a television product because it takes weeks upon weeks at times.
Yeah, it would be like one of those like student art films or what was the whatchamacallit cut of one of those superhero movies that was like 4 hours long. Like it's gonna be one of those deals, like a real artsy long. But I mean the payoff at the end, man. You just wait.
Shoot it in black and white too.
Of course, you got to watch the flower slowly dying. Yes, absolutely. So this is, as Tony sort of explained there, this is a very complicated process, and we're gonna sort of go through and sort of speculate on some things. This is obviously very back of the envelope math from us on this. We can give you some of the factors that they're considering. We can give you some of the main games you're looking at. These guys are looking down to the fifth and sixth games, and what else is on that weekend and all that kind of stuff. So this is not necessarily going to be an exact guarantee of this is the order and this is, book your hotels based on what TV network we're telling you will probably have this game. This is just kind of a little bit more of a thought exercise. So, this is all sort of informed speculation, let's say. We know that Fox will make the week of the Ohio State-Michigan game their first pick because they always do. And back on April 1st, Fox's executive vice president in charge of strategy said Fox Thanksgiving weekend now lines up as Cowboys on Thursday, USA, England, and Michigan, Ohio State. Seems all right. Yes, that should be a good weekend for the Fox Broadcasting Company. And yes, before this draft even started, Fox was already planting their flag on that Ohio State-Michigan game. So yes, you may safely set your schedule for noon on that Saturday. After that, then it gets a little dicier because the ESPN and ABC will have the second pick of the week of games again. The second pick of which week they would have the first pick. So that was confusing. There are a bunch of possible answers to that. We're going to do it just sort of in terms of the top games that week. Just a little background information before we start. Here were last year's most watched games because this is going to factor in maybe into some of these decisions. Number 1 was Ohio State, Michigan, 15.9 million viewers. Number 2 was the SEC Championship, just a few 100,000 behind that. Number 3 was the Big Ten Championship. That was like 4 million less than the Ohio State-Michigan game. So that's why Ohio State-Michigan is always number 1. Number 4 was the Iron Bowl. Number 5, and this is kind of interesting, Michigan State. It was a little bit of a, both teams were better than expected last year. That was a bigger game than expected, but that was a number 5 most watched game last year. The only other Big Ten games that were in the top 12 were number 11, Ohio State, Oregon, and number 12, Auburn, Penn State. So here's sort of your choices. We're going to just run through these, and we're just going to look at kind of like the real premier games. Week 1, Notre Dame at Ohio State. Week 2, Alabama at Texas, because these two conferences, the two TV networks are picking those as well. Week 3, Oklahoma at Nebraska. Week 4, Wisconsin at Ohio State. Week 6 is Red River. Week 7 is kind of an interesting one because you got Penn State at Michigan, which is a big one. Michigan State at Wisconsin, that's a big one. The really interesting one, though, is Week 9. That's Ohio State at Penn State, and that's also Michigan State. So there's a little bit of game theory there where those are both really big games, but if you have the second pick that week, you're still getting a pretty good game. So, all right, Tony, you can go ahead and put your ESPN/ABC hat on. I guess those would just be kind of mouse ears right now. Which week would you pick to have the first pick after Ohio State, Michigan, Week 13 is taken?
I think you go Week 1 so that you get that Notre Dame at Ohio State game. And then there are also, like, the game that you're going to get third that week is probably going to be pretty good as well. But, that was the fear, I know, when there was the whole Joe Buck and Troy Aikman trade for a Big Ten game. The fear that was that Fox was going to get the Notre Dame Ohio State game and put it on at noon. I'm going to assume, and I believe that ESPN, ABC will pick that up instead. We'll draft Week 1. We'll have this set for a primetime game for the first time that these two teams have ever played in a primetime game, because even their bowl games have been during the day, if I recall correctly. So, I think they're going to go Week 1 and secure that one. And then, you end up with maybe the third game selected is Georgia versus Oregon, which is, an interesting matchup as well, or something like that. Or they're early in the season, there are always some interesting non-conference matchups that they can find and work with. But it is a tough call between that and Alabama at Texas, because that is going to do that week. That is Week 2 is going to do some huge numbers as well. But I don't think anything compares to Ohio State, Notre Dame outside of Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, Ohio State, and Ohio State is probably the number 1 TV draw in terms of just national ratings. Just the whole state of Ohio will have their TV sets on when Ohio State is playing any kind of a significant football game. Ohio State is enough of a national brand that you're going to have a lot of people watching from across the country. Notre Dame, I think people roll their eyes at the idea of Notre Dame, who hasn't won a major bowl game since 1994, 15,000 days and counting, I think, but at least 10,000, a whole bunch of days. We only count down on the show. We don't count up. Those two teams, those are two major national brands. You're basically going to have the whole Midwest watching for that game. that to me is a very clear number one, number one pick there. And I think you probably you nailed right there. The next one in line, Alabama, Texas. Both very, very big schools. You're going to have the whole SEC watching. I don't think that's going to be quite as compelling a game as Ohio State Notre Dame will be. I don't know if Sark's going to hold up his end of the bargain there, but there are going to be a lot of eyeballs watching at least the first half of that game. I'm assuming that would be the next pick in order for you.
Well, I wonder because does Fox want that, or is there another week that they would rather have instead? But I think how often does Fox get an Alabama game? I don't think it's very often at all. So this would be an opportunity to do that, and also, it would. People are going to watch it clearly, and they may not be able to watch it for all 4 quarters, but maybe they will. So it seems like that makes the most sense to grab week 2 there and just secure that, because now you've got that's a pretty good haul for Fox, those in their first 2 picks, if that's where they go.
Yeah, those are going to be 2 of probably 2 of the 10 most watched games you would think of the season, and they're not going to have access to any of the SEC home games. Like Fox, that is a CBS and ESPN deal. Fox doesn't have a shot at any of those SEC teams. So, this is why these are sort of appealing, because when you get those national brands, you don't get a lot of chances to have, like Tony said, you don't get a lot of chances to have Alabama fans turning on Fox. ABC, ESPN does not get a ton of chances to have Notre Dame fans turning their channel on. That's something that you're not gonna pass up the opportunity to get those eyeballs, get maybe some different eyeballs, and get a lot of them. So, after that, it gets a little more interesting, because you got Red River. That's going to be a noon kick. So that seems like it would be a perfect fit for Fox, but ABC, ESPN has the next pick. Oklahoma, Nebraska is like, And then you get Wisconsin at Ohio State. I think that's an interesting possibility here. That would be week 4. And then you've got the 2 weeks where you've got a couple of really good games, Penn State at Michigan, and then Michigan State, Wisconsin, and that's week 7. Then you get the Ohio State, Penn State game, and then the Michigan State game. Tony, where are you going next if you have the next pick?
I know what Buckeye fans should be hoping for with that 4th pick overall, and that's for ESPN to take the Ohio State Penn State week. Take that week 9, and actually, I should let me change that. If you're a Penn State fan, because if it's on ABC or ESPN, that's obviously going to be a whiteout, and if it's on Fox, it may not be. So, that's one that it kind of feels destined. If it's not the 4th pick, it'll be the 6th pick, or it'll somehow end up with ESPN so that it can be a whiteout again, as always. I think we're going to maybe see a resurgence of Michigan again, where they try to cash in on that and those eyeballs, and do they go back to the Michigan State well, or is it the Michigan Penn State well instead? I gotta assume there's going to be another Michigan pick in here somewhere in that 4th pick.
Yeah, I think you're right, because Michigan, I don't think people are necessarily expecting Michigan to have a really fantastic national championship, can hang with Alabama / Georgia kind of team this year, but the schedule's such that the record's probably gonna be real shiny, because their non-conference schedule is there's a reason we haven't mentioned any of their games here, and so they're probably gonna have a nice shiny record by the time you're getting into week 7, Penn State coming to town, or week 9 with the Michigan State game. I'm with you that's probably somewhere in there. That is probably going to be a pretty big TV draw, both of those games. The one interesting thing about that week 9 game, the Ohio State Penn State game, this is October 29th we're talking about here. So if that ends up as a Fox game, it is going to be a noon game, because what does Fox have at the end of November or end of October? Got the World Series. That's the prime time. That is the Fox primetime broadcast those nights. So Fox is not going to have, there is no chance that Fox can kick the game to prime time, because they got the World Series. So if that game is on Fox, then that would be then that becomes a noon kick, which then removes some of the luster around that game, which then maybe makes you think maybe Fox doesn't take that game. So yeah, there's a lot of as we said earlier, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of strategy here. And, there is a reason that the professionals take months to do this, and we're kind of trying to knock it out in about 15 minutes or so. But yeah, there's, there is, every time you talk to someone who's involved in this process or talk to someone who really follows this process closely, it's amazing how many different variables go into this. But when you think about the amount of money involved here, and the amount of money in these TV contracts, the amount of eyeballs we're talking about here for these really big games, it's like, well, I understand why they feel the need to take some time and sort of work this stuff out slowly.
Yeah, and it's big money, and if you don't meet like your promises, some of that money has to be given back, and there's all kinds of things involved there. So it's like any other draft where you are spending time and research so that you maximize every single pick, and not just the first pick of that week, but like what else do we think we're going to be able to get that week? Because there's not just Fox, there's the Big Ten Network, there's FS1, there's FS2, and it's not just ESPN or ABC. There's ESPN2, there's ESPNU, like all of these different things that eventually have to filter down. So there's weeks there where it looks like it would be a great pick for you, but you could probably still, like, it's like any other draft. You might be able to get that guy a couple weeks later, even though you really want him. ESPN or Fox doesn't. So it's like, we'll put that one off to the side for a little bit, and then we'll come back to it and get it, with a greater value lower on. But it would be interesting to be a fly on the wall, except you would just, there's no actual wall per se. It's just, can you just CC us on the emails? I guess that is how, or even BCC. You won't even know we're there.
Yeah, it is a really interesting process. And, like I said, way more involved we can get into here. Well, I mean, what you mentioned, the Big Ten Network there are certain weeks when the Big Ten Network is like higher in the pecking order in terms of where they would get to pick. And, the Big Ten Network is a Fox property, so they get the Fox pick. But like, for example, last year, the Big Ten Network was the one that televised Iowa, Nebraska. Now you're going, who cares? Iowa, Nebraska. Well, Iowa, Nebraska runs on the Friday after Thanksgiving, when, let's not do traffic and stereotypes here, but men are more likely to be sitting on their butts at home rather than being out at the mall on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So as you were scanning through the TV and heating up your Thanksgiving leftovers, you were probably watching that Iowa-Nebraska game. That was a Big Ten Network game last year, which that probably felt a little, you would normally think that's an ABC game. You always think historically that being like an ABC game. That it was on Big Ten Network last year. That was, you're going to see some weird spots. Ohio State is going to end up, there are the TV contracts that, each school is going to appear on the Big Ten Network only so many times. You're not going to be on 7 times. You're not going to be on 0 times. So there's all sorts of really involved calculations that go on in this process. But, really this far out, you, dear listener and viewer, are probably mostly concerned with, when is the Ohio State Notre Dame game going to be? And without being able to officially tell you, I think we're kind of unofficially telling you, probably going to be on ABC/ESPN, probably going to be a primetime game. Don't necessarily book all your travel just yet. We can't guarantee that, but typically those those games that get picked early, the weeks that Fox knows, hey, we've got the number 1 pick, you're going to see an announcement just in a couple weeks, probably, about Ohio State hosting Michigan, noon, November 26th. You'll see that announcement, and ABC, ESPN will probably, if they put out an Ohio State Notre Dame, announcement, you'll know then. But yeah, I would expect to see that stuff relatively soon, and then you can start making your plans for real. But college football gambling, you don't have to limit it just to the point spreads. You can also book your hotels if you really feel like taking a chance on our somewhat informed and somewhat reckless speculation. But that'll do it for today. Tony, thank you for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed that show. This is always one of those like college football nuts and bolts things that's like, boy, we're really getting down into the weeds here, but also this is something that 6 months from now you're going to be really mad about, game time or whatever on at some point. Like, why is Ohio State playing Akron in primetime? And the answer is because of this. So there you go. There's your answer. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.